All right, let's take a look at an example of how to actually put the pieces together and graph this function here. So I want to graph f of x equals 3 times the sine of 2 times the quantity x minus pi over 4 plus 1. So the best way to do this is basically just list all of your key facts here. And so I'm going to start off with the amplitude. The amplitude, that's given by the a value, so that's going to be 3. The next piece that I'll do is I like to do my y transformations together. So now let's talk about the midline. That's going to be y equals 1. So right away, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my y-axis and start labeling some things. So I'm going to go, I have a y equals 1 midline. So it looks something like this. And then I'm going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and then down 3, 1, 2, 3. That'll encapsulate my maximum and my minimum. So just to set that up. The next thing I want to look at is, let's change, or no, we'll keep the same color. Let's look at the period. The period is going to be 2 pi over b. In this case, it's 2 pi over 2, so the period is going to equal pi. And maybe with that, I'll take care of my key values, or my key intervals. My key intervals are going to be pi divided by 4. So that's the spacing between each of my key points. And then finally, I'll take my phase shift. My phase shift is positive pi over 4. So at this point, I can start to label some things. So as far as how I want to label my x-axis, I got to think, well, I'm shifting over a pi over 4, so I definitely need to shift over pi over 4. And then my interval should be pi over 4. So I'm going to then tick off the next pi over 4, which would be pi over 2. I'm going to add another pi over 4, which would be 3 pi over 4. I'm going to add another pi over 4, which would be 4 pi over 4, or just pi. And then one more to get the last piece, 5 pi over 4. And then I'm going to actually go to the left for a full period as well. So I'll go to the left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so it's going to be a negative pi over 4, a negative pi over 2, a negative 3 pi over 4, and a negative pi. All right, so I've got all my pieces together, and now at this point I'm using that general pattern of midline to max to midline to min back up to the midline. So let's put this together then. Let's start with my phase shift is my starting point, is my midline, and I'm going to start at the midline. So I'm starting right here. I shifted to the right pi over 4, and I'm starting at the mid. Then I go up to my max, the next key x value, back down to my midline, then down to my minimum, back up to my midline. And then I'm just going to do the opposite going the other way. I'm going to go down to my minimum, up to my midline, up to my maximum, down to my midline, and down to my minimum. So it's going to look something like this. So here's one wave, and here's the other side of the wave. Why don't you try this example here? I want you to see if you can put all the pieces together and graph one of these on your own. Pause the video, give this one a shot, see how it goes. All right, and here is the answer. So here's all my key values or my key information, the amplitude, the midline, the period, the phase shift, the key interval. Again, I got that by dividing the period by 4, since I'm chopping it up into 4 major sections. One other thing, though, that's important is when we have this negative a value, remember your function transformations. That actually reflects this thing over the x-axis. So normally, remember, you'd start, this is my starting point. Normally with the sine curve, you go up to the max. But since this is a reflection, I'm actually going to be flipping this whole thing, and I'm going to be going down first, then up. Or down to my minimum, then up to my midline and max, the complete reflection of the normal sine curve. So hopefully it went okay. And it all made sense to you.